out a theme song for our campaign. And here it comes. Just listen to it.
We're crazy. Crazy for freedom.
Political parties are so much a part of American life that we rarely think about them except at election time or in the heat of legislative battles. Then we tend to think of our two major parties as huge centralized powers. Not true. Our political parties are, in fact, highly decentralized organizations with decision-making power widely dispersed at local, state, and national levels. And far more than we imagine, political parties are deeply entwined with our democratic way of life. I'm Renee Poussaint. The major purpose of political parties is to provide a mechanism for citizens to elect individuals who share their political agendas. Parties recruit candidates, support them in many ways during election campaigns, and on election day go all out to increase voter turnout for the candidates they support.
Como siempre es un placer venir a compartir con ustedes un poquito y ya saben, a muchos de ustedes los vi en la próxima.
I think when you're looking for a candidate to reflect the principles of the Democratic Party, you want somebody who has a real relationship with the community. At the same time, strength of character is important. Campaigns are tough.
Do they have a basic understanding and interest in the issues? Do they care about what they're doing? Do they have a philosophy, or is it just about winning an election?
I'm looking for someone who has a hope and a vision for a country where all of us are welcome. Cindy is that kind of young leader.
Cindy Montanez is a rising star in the California Democratic Party. She's a city council member and mayor of San Fernando, a city of 24,000 people in Los Angeles County. And she's 28 years old.
Yeah, I'm not the typical mayor. Obviously, I'm a lot younger than most mayors. Usually I go into an event and you know, people will ask me, oh, so what do you do? And I'll let them know I'm the mayor of the city of San Fernando. And their response, you know, will usually be, oh, so you work for the mayor of the city of San Fernando. And I say, no, I am the mayor of the city of San Fernando.
Cindy's parents, Margarita and Ramon Montanez, immigrated to the San Fernando area from Mexico in the early 70s. Their top priority was always the education of their 6 children, and some of the most important lessons came from life, not books.
The focus of everything was that whatever we do, it was to change things, because our experience was one of poverty. It was one of need to just change the world that was around us.
As a teenager, Cindy spent every summer doing volunteer work in the community. Her social commitment and family background determined her political direction.
When I was 18 years old, and when I went to register to vote, I knew that I was going to register a Democrat. It's the party that's talking about, you know, really the issues of change, social justice, of equality.
In 1993, in her first year at UCLA, Cindy and 8 other people staged a hunger strike. At that time, Democratic Party leader Richard Alarcón was serving on the Los Angeles City Council.
We were at the time looking for interns in my office. I wanted to have the ability to reach into the community and help build leadership. And frankly, it was the work that she did on the hunger strike that moved me to ask her to come on board.
He was ready and willing, and often went out on a limb to fight for and be a voice for the people that did not have a voice. And I think it was that to this day, I mean, he continues to be a very strong mentor. He continues to be somebody that I have an excellent working relationship with.
She was not unwilling to engage me in debate if she felt strongly on an issue. And for me, recognizing that a 20-year-old person could stand up to a city council member and tell them their opinion, that showed a lot of strength.
Even while working as an intern, Cindy didn't envision running for office herself. But 2 years later, at a family gathering, discussion arose about upcoming San Fernando City Council elections.
My sister, Maribel, who now happens to be on City Council with me, she actually brought up the idea, well, Cindy, why don't you run? You know, you've been involved, you know, since you were a very little girl. You know a lot of people like you. And she says, oh, no, I couldn't. I'm too young. I'm only 24. It's not going to happen. No one will vote for me.
And she's scared because we don't have money and we don't have, but I tell her, well, we don't have money, but we are a lot. We can work pretty good. And that's the way to start, you know, start with a little money, but a lot of heart.
And we started having neighborhood meetings where it started with one woman getting excited about my story and identifying with it, turning around and calling her sons and daughters. It wasn't about me, it was about them. It was about them being able to understand that my story was their story, that the issues that I wanted to work on were the issues that they wanted to work on.
The city council election was nonpartisan, but the Democratic Party put its muscle behind Cindy.
The Democratic Party has a very important role to play in nonpartisan election, and that is to drive the issues of policy. And so where they don't take a position on a particular candidate based on their party affiliation, they do need to ensure that all candidates fight for better education, better poverty programming, better social service programs.
Cindy won the election, and her work as a council member and mayor has been marked by her ability to involve people in city affairs.
And the way I always saw it is it's about increasing civic participation, because as an elected official, you're supposed to try to inspire other people. As a leader, you're supposed to try to inspire other individuals to get involved.
When term limits forced the Democratic incumbent in Cindy's state assembly district out of office, Richard Alarcon suggested that Cindy run. She hesitated.
Her dedication to the city of San Fernando was making it very difficult for her to quickly move on to a higher position in the state assembly, which took on probably about 20 times the population of San Fernando.
But the opportunity to serve 450,000 people in a district with profound needs prevailed, and Cindy decided to run. The good news, her district is heavily Democratic. The bad news, the Democratic primary was hotly contested. Faced with an uphill battle, Cindy concentrated on grassroots campaigning and seeking endorsements from Democratic Party leaders.
During the primary, the support of party leaders means a lot. And one of the things that people really rely on is the support of, who's supporting you. She had, the majority of the state senators, the majority of the assembly members. She had so many different unions and community leaders, and she built all these coalitions. I had never seen a candidate work so hard and have so many names behind her.
One key endorsement came from Antonio Villaraigosa, a former Speaker of the Assembly and a member of the Democratic National Committee.
Yes, she's a Democrat, the party of the big tent. But what makes her special is that she's someone who understands that if democracy is going to work, we've got to start from the grassroots. We've got to get everybody to roll up their sleeves. We've got to get people inspired about making their community better. Cindy is one of those kind of young leaders. That's why I was excited to have endorsed her and endorsed her so early.
She's smart, she's energetic, and I think perhaps more importantly than anything, she can inspire young people who are wondering whether or not to be involved and participate in the political process.
Cindy Montanez ended up sweeping the Democratic primary. As the winner, she now has the support of the full Democratic Party. Since her district is heavily Democratic, she'll help in other campaigns and build relationships with many other Democratic Assembly members.
The political process is all about relationships. It has less to do with ideology than how you behave with your fellow colleague. It's about the trust you build with that person.
Thank you to Senator Richard Alarcón for that wonderful, wonderful introduction. I have a lot of respect for Richard because when I first ran for city council, Richard was always there. The first person saying, Cindy, you should run for city council. When I became the mayor of the city, it was Richard.
It was that connectedness to the grassroots that every time she asked me my opinion on her political future, I always said, you're going up.
I think she has an incredible future in politics. She's starting at a very young age. She's won every office she's run for, and she has people talking about her far beyond the district.
I'm really looking forward to being up in Sacramento. Senator Alarcón is going to be our state senator for another 5 years, and I look forward to being up in Sacramento and serving with Senator Alarcón on the assembly side.
For several years, Americans have complained that there is not a dime's worth of difference between the Democratic and Republican parties. But that's not really the case. While Republicans and Democrats do agree on some issues, they also offer Americans distinctly different policy agendas. These differences, reflected in the party platforms, become most evident in electoral races where much is at stake. New York City, 1993. These were not exactly the good old days. A wave of violent street crime, a lingering crack epidemic, and an economic downturn all contributed to a deep sense of malaise among New Yorkers.
It was a city just barely coming out of a recession. It was a city that seemed to be plagued by crime. And there was a feeling of desperation, there was a feeling of frustration.
In this atmosphere, the 1993 race for mayor promised to be a contentious one. Democratic incumbent David Dinkins faced the same Republican challenger he had narrowly defeated 4 years earlier, former U.S. Attorney Rudolph Giuliani.
It was a rematch. It was sort of a grudge match. This time David Dinkins had a record to run on, and this time Rudy Giuliani had 4 years out of office to spend boning up for becoming mayor of New York.
David Dinkins was a Democrat with a traditional party view that government can play a useful role in solving social problems.
I am a staunch advocate of providing for the least among us.
He supported community empowerment. He believed in the importance of labor unions. He was a believer in government being able to fix some of the basic problems that people face in their everyday life.
In his 1990 inauguration address, Dinkins dedicated his administration to the city's children. As mayor, he set about instituting social programs for them. One of his most successful projects was an after-hours youth service program he called Beacon Schools.
The name Beacon is drawn from a speech I made one day, speaking about beacons of hope and how schools could be such by using them beyond the hours of instruction to provide programs designed by the community, paid for by city government, for young people and their families.
Rudolph Giuliani, like most Republican candidates, advocated reducing the role of government. He promised to cut taxes, provide incentives to the business community, and trim the welfare rolls.
Giuliani was true to Republican philosophy in the sense that he was very skeptical of government, especially social welfare.
He said, if you receive a city benefit, you should give something back to the city. There's not an unconditional entitlement.
Streets back to the people, fight crime. Let me tell you that I know about the crime that you have to deal with.
But the centerpiece of Giuliani's platform was the war on crime. Here, the former prosecutor believed government could play an effective role in protecting private property and assuring personal safety.
They were both very concerned about diminishing crime in the city, but they took different approaches. Dinkins' policing philosophy was community-oriented, that the police should be closer to the community, more personally engaged with them. Giuliani did not like the community policing philosophy and was much more oriented towards a problem-oriented approach, where the police department would see where the concentrations of crime were taking place and concentrate their resources on those areas.
Dinkins was quick to point out that he had hired an additional 5,000 police officers, and statistically, crime in the Big Apple was on the wane. Giuliani argued that was not enough. Until the minor crimes and lawlessness plaguing the city's quality of life were dealt with, New Yorkers would never feel safe.
Giuliani promised that New Yorkers didn't have to live with the fear that their cars would be broken into and their radios stolen, and of having homeless people, often mentally ill, often on drugs, come through their subways, that this was not something that was inherent in city life, but was something that could be controlled and eradicated.
I'm standing before you as the next mayor of New York City.
On November 2nd, 1993, by a narrow margin, 71,000 votes, New Yorkers cast their ballots for change. And over the course of Giuliani's 2 terms in office, significant changes did come to the city, especially in the area of crime, which began to drop significantly. Upon taking office, the mayor began the implementation of the Quality of Life initiative he had promised during his campaign. The police began to focus aggressively on petty crimes.
What they found was that the people that they were arresting for so-called petty crimes, like jumping turnstiles, had long arrest records. They found one man who had murdered several women and beaten up others because he had jumped the turnstile, and they got his fingerprints, and they found his fingerprints at the other crime scenes. So what they discovered was there's sort of a vast chain of criminality.
But Giuliani's initiatives were not received enthusiastically by everyone.
He thinks it's important to attack minor crimes. I don't disagree with that, in the sense that minor crimes, if you control them, you can control the larger ones. But he seemed to throw the civil liberties out the window with this.
He basically tripled the number of people who were entered into the system. Young minority males in this city did begin to feel like they were being targeted by the police.
During his terms as mayor, Rudolph Giuliani had the good fortune of presiding over the city during a booming economy. As promised, he cut taxes and offered financial incentives to the corporate community. But when it came to the city's poor, his policies got mixed reviews.
He's proud of the fact that he greatly reduced the number of persons on the welfare rolls. But they did it exercising some very severe postures.
Staying true to his Republican philosophy of reducing government's role, Giuliani encouraged the privatization of New York's homeless shelters, increasing their efficiency. But in contrast to his Democratic predecessors, he made no long-term expenditures for housing the homeless.
It is significant that today there are more homeless in our city than at any time since we started keeping statistics on it.
Throughout his administration, Giuliani was both celebrated and denounced. But in the end, few would accuse him of straying from his initial platform.
Certainly the things that New Yorkers cared about politically, cared about in elections, Rudy Giuliani delivered on. And the main thing was reducing crime, reducing fear, and giving the city a sense that there was hope, there was a future.
We like to criticize our political parties for their contentious, often confrontational behavior. But the upside of that equation is that parties provide an essential structure for organizing the executive and legislative branches of government. This can be clearly seen when there is a dramatic shift in party control, particularly at the national level. In the U.S. Congress, when an election turns the political tables on either the Democrats or Republicans, there is a shakeup in everything, from offices to legislative agendas. In 2001, after one of the most contested elections in American history, George W. Bush was sworn in as the 43rd President of the United States. With the House of Representatives narrowly held by Republicans and an evenly divided Senate, Bush promised to govern from the middle. But when the new president played hardball with Congress to pass a very conservative agenda, Vermont Senator Jim Jeffords made a stunning announcement.
In order to best represent my state of Vermont, my own conscience, and principles I have stood for my whole life, I will leave the Republican Party and become an independent.
Jeffords' defection gave Democrats a majority in the Senate, along with all the powers and privileges that entailed.
Senator Jeffords' decision obviously produces some changes. The historic 50-50 Senate now becomes history itself. This will be America's first 50-49-1 Senate.
The difference of a single vote in the Senate is the difference to create the agenda, to call legislation forward, to appoint conference committees. This will significantly alter the legislative landscape in Washington and create a very different environment for George W. Bush.
White House correspondent Dana Milbank has reported on how Jeffords shifted the balance of power between the Bush administration and Congress.
What I think people may not have paid attention to is how important it is to have committee chairmen, how important it is to have the power of subpoena, the power to investigate. That is really where the Democrats have benefited here.
The shift was most dramatic on the Governmental Affairs Committee, where Democrat Joseph Lieberman took over the chairmanship from Republican Fred Thompson. As Senator Lieberman's Director of Communications, Leslie Phillips experienced the switch to majority status firsthand.
When you're in the majority, you can determine what your agenda is. You call the shots and you determine what issues you want to investigate, whether you want to investigate, whether you want to hold hearings, what sort of focus the committee is going to have. And that is very important because that is using the taxpayers' money and the taxpayers' trust to look at issues that are of concern to them, that you think are of concern to them.
As everyone knows, the Governmental Affairs Committee has begun an investigation into foreign campaigns.
In 1997, Senator Thompson used his power as chair of the Governmental Affairs Committee to investigate the financing of Bill Clinton's second presidential campaign. But in 2002, the new chairman, Lieberman, turned the committee's attention to a matter that many Republicans would have preferred to avoid: the Bush administration's ties to the failed energy giant Enron. As Congress soon learned, the company had inflated its revenues by hiding debt in over 800 phony partnerships. What made this corporation's implosion even more dramatic was its ties to Washington and the White House.
Enron was extremely well connected politically. They gave a large number, millions of dollars, to Democrats and Republicans, but particularly Republicans. They were the single largest contributors to George W. Bush over the years as governor of Texas and during his presidential run. This all occurred before the Jim Jeffords switch, when the Republicans controlled both houses. You can pretty much rest assured that the congressional committees would not be looking at all at the White House and their role involving Enron, involving energy policy, involving the environment.
Enron was ranked as the 7th largest corporation in America.
After investigating the failure of government regulators and collecting literally tons of evidence, the committee turned to the Bush administration for missing pieces of the Enron puzzle.
It became clear to the senator that the White House was stonewalling and delaying and was never going to hand over the information willingly. And so he decided, reluctantly, I think, to take this issue of the subpoena to a committee vote.
The Jeffords switch not only gave Democrats a majority on the Senate floor, but also on every committee. All 9 Democrats on government affairs voted for the subpoenas, overruling the committee's 8 Republicans.
The subpoenas will be issued by the committee.
2 weeks later, the White House gave in and agreed to deliver 2,000 pages of documents on condition that they be read only by select staffers and be kept in a locked room with an alarm.
Had the Jeffords switch not occurred, he could not have issued those subpoenas, and there would be no, I mean, there may well have been an investigation of Enron, but it certainly wouldn't have involved the White House. So it's, that's where you have this huge tidal shift, more than any piece of legislation. It's really in the power to investigate that this changed everything.
The day after the subpoena vote, the Senate Democrats and a sole independent, Jim Jeffords, gathered on the west front of the Capitol to commemorate the historic change in power. Thomas Jefferson once said, "If I could not go to heaven except with a political party, I would not go there at all." Yet Jefferson, along with James Madison, who also scorned political parties, created one. Why did these two men, so disdainful of parties, create one of their own? Experience in the new government taught both Jefferson and Madison that however much they may have regretted it, political parties are essential to a representative democracy. Why? Because parties organize broad coalitions of people to recruit, nominate, and elect candidates for public office. And through these officials, they implement shared political goals. In addition to organizing elections and creating policy, parties also play a key role in organizing and running the government. Strange as it may seem, especially to Americans who tend to be cynical, political parties provide a vital link between the public and government officials. Think about elections without political parties. The first thing you would notice is the multitude of candidates, as every interest in society clamored for votes. How would you, as a rational voter, choose among all of these candidates? How would you know what each of them stood for? And after the election, how would a government composed of office holders, each touting their own agenda, organize to get anything done? Isn't it likely that out of this chaos would come both candidates and the citizens who elect them, forming broad coalitions to further their common interests? And what might we call these coalitions? How about political parties? For Democracy in America, I'm Renee Poussaint.